In 1991, two hikers in the Alps found a body melting out of the ice. It had lain there for 5,300 years, and it was carrying something that, by every rule of the age it came from, it simply should not have had. He was so perfectly frozen, he still had tattoos on his skin and his last meal in his stomach. But the thing that should stop you is what was lying beside him: an axe. And the blade was not stone, it was metal, near pure copper. Now hold that. When scientists sampled that blade and traced its chemistry to the ore it came from, the metal did not come from his mountains. It came from Tuscany, about 500 kilometers to the south. Centuries before Egypt raised a single pyramid, a man in the Alps was carrying metal that had already crossed a continent. And here's why that man in the ice matters to you. Every hard, bright thing in your life, the knife in your kitchen, the wiring in your walls, the phone in your hand, traces back to a single staggering moment when a human being first melted a stone and poured out a metal that had never existed in nature. We carve the past into the Stone Age, the Bronze Age, the Iron Age. But the truth is, we never left the age of metal. You are still living in it. This is the story of the first thing our species ever made instead of found. And it begins with what looks, frankly, like magic.
Last time, we watched writing pin the world down in wet clay. But in the very same centuries, other hands were working a stranger craft. Durant, mapping the economic roots of civilization, saw tools and materials as the quiet engine under everything else, the mastery of stuff. And for an almost unimaginable span, more than 2 million years, that mastery had one rule. Every tool a human ever made, they made by taking away. You start with a stone, and you chip, and you flake, and you grind pieces off until what's left is sharp. Metal broke that rule. Metal was the first time we didn't subtract from the world. We transformed it.
It started gently. The first metal people used wasn't smelted at all. It was found. In a few places, copper occurs in the ground as pure metal, in soft, reddish lumps you can pick up. At a village called Çayönü, in what is now Turkey, some 9,000 years ago, people were hammering that native copper cold into beads, hooks, little awls. To them, copper was just a special kind of stone, one that, oddly, wouldn't shatter when you hit it. It bent, it flowed a little, it shone. For thousands of years, that was metal, a pretty rock. And then someone made a leap so large we still don't fully understand how they got there. Somebody discovered that if you take a certain dull green stone, not metal at all, just rock, and you heat it in a fire hot enough, fierce enough, the rock bleeds. Shining liquid copper weeps out of solid stone.
The oldest place we can prove this happened is Belovode in Serbia, about 7,000 years ago. Think about what that person had just done. They hadn't shaped a material. They had unmade one substance and created another that had never existed in that form in all of nature. That is the first chemistry. That is the first time a human being reached into the deep rules of matter and rewrote them. And if you had watched someone feed green rock and fire into a furnace and pour out a river of gleaming metal, you would not have called it technology. You would have called it sorcery. Which is exactly why, in culture after culture, the smith is a figure of awe and fear, half craftsman and half magician. Once you can melt metal, you can pour it into any shape you like. In a cave near the Dead Sea, archaeologists found a hoard from the Copper Age, 429 copper objects, including the oldest crown on Earth, cast by pouring molten metal into a mold made of wax that then melts away. The oldest crown in the world. Already, metal wasn't just for tools, it was for power.
But pure copper has a weakness: it's soft. Beautiful, but it bends. And here the smiths made their masterstroke. Mix molten copper with a second metal, tin, and something almost alchemical happens. The blend, bronze, is far harder than either metal alone. Hard enough to hold a razor edge. Hard enough to make a sword that beats a stone one every single time. Bronze is the alloy that armed the first empires, and it kicks off a whole age of the world we still name after it, the Bronze Age, from about 5,000 years ago. But bronze came with a catch that would shape the next 3,000 years. To make it, you need tin, and tin is almost nowhere. Copper ore is common, tin is freakishly rare, buried in just a handful of places across the whole ancient world, the mountains of Turkey, the Hindu Kush in Afghanistan, and, unbelievably far away, Cornwall in Britain.
So think about what bronze forced people to do. To arm your soldiers in the Near East, you might need tin dug up 2,000 miles away by people you would never meet, speaking a language you'd never hear, and passed hand to hand along a chain of traders across mountains and seas, the so-called tin roads. Otzi's axe, with its copper from 500 kilometers off, was just the opening note of that song. Bronze didn't only make sharper tools, it knitted strangers on opposite sides of a continent into a single web of exchange, arguably the first globalization. And it built a new kind of power because whoever controlled the metal, the ore, the tin, the smiths, could arm an army the neighbors couldn't match. Now, scholars still argue over how this all began. Was metalworking invented once in the Near East and carried outward, or did it flare up independently in several places, with that Serbian evidence hinting it was born in the Balkans just as early? And was bronze fundamentally a story of trade or of local resources? The honest answer seems to be both. Soft local metal first, then a hard alloy that simply could not exist without reaching across the world.
Whatever the root, metal changed what a human being was. For 2.5 million years we had been shapers, clever apes who chipped the world's materials into useful edges. With metal we became something new, transformers. We learned to take a substance, destroy its very nature in fire, and rebuild it as something that had never existed before. Every alloy since, every steel beam, every bronze bell, every gold ring, every silicon chip in the device you're holding, descends from that first astonishing act. Someone heating a dull green stone until it bled a metal. And it ended an era. The Stone Age had lasted, quite literally, since before we were human. Metal closed it. Which brings us back to the man in the ice. He carried his copper axe up a mountain and died there, and it sat beside him under the snow for 5,000 years. He thought he was carrying a tool. He had no idea he was carrying the future, a piece of transformed matter, hauled across a continent from the age that was ending into the ages that were coming. He was holding in his cold hand the end of the Stone Age.
Next time on Civilization OS. Those tin roads that fed the furnaces didn't only carry metal, they carried the first long-distance trade, goods moving between people who would never meet, who had no king in common and no shared God. And trade poses a problem as old as the first bargain. How do a farmer, a smith, and a king ever agree what a thing is worth? The answer is one of the strangest inventions in this whole series. Money. Older than coins, older even than writing. The birth of trade, debt, and the price of everything.